Abkhazia's political status is disputed and highly complex. Abkhazia is a region in the South Caucasus that declared independence from Georgia after the violent war of 1992 to 1993. While it considers itself an independent republic and operates with its own government, military, and institutions, most of the international community, including the United Nations, still recognizes it as part of Georgia. Only a few countries, such as Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Nauru, and Syria, officially recognize Abkhazia as a sovereign state. The region relies heavily on Russian military and financial support, and Russian troops are stationed there, which further deepens the political divide. This situation has created a kind of frozen conflict, where tensions remain high, but large-scale violence has ceased, though the region remains diplomatically and economically isolated from much of the world. While Abkhaz is the official language of Abkhazia and holds deep cultural and national significance, the majority of people in the region speak Russian in their everyday lives. This is largely due to the Soviet legacy and the strong political and economic ties with Russia. The Abkhaz language is part of the Northwest Caucasian language family and is known for its complexity, featuring a large number of consonants and few vowels. Despite being an official language, it is considered endangered, with limited use in education, media, and public administration. The Abkhaz government has tried to promote the language through schooling and cultural programs, but Russian remains dominant in business, media, and even government affairs. This linguistic reality reflects the broader political and cultural influence Russia holds over the region. The Abkhaz War, 1992 to 1993, changed the region forever. The war between Georgian government forces and Abkhaz separatists broke out in August 1992 and lasted for over a year. It was one of the bloodiest conflicts in the post-Soviet space. Backed by volunteers from the North Caucasus and reportedly supported by Russian forces, Abkhaz fighters launched a brutal campaign to push out Georgian troops and civilians. By the end of the war in 1993, thousands had died, and more than 200,000 ethnic Georgians were displaced from Abkhazia, a tragedy that remains unresolved to this day. Many of these people still live as internally displaced persons, IDPs, in Georgia. The war left behind deep scars, destroyed cities like Sukhumi, and created a lasting ethnic and political divide that still shapes the identity and politics of Abkhazia today. Tourism in Abkhazia exists in a legal gray zone. Despite its political isolation, Abkhazia attracts thousands of tourists every year, especially from Russia. The region boasts stunning natural beauty, from the lush Caucasus Mountains to the turquoise shores of the Black Sea. Places like Lake Ritsa, the new Athos cave, and Sukhumi's botanical gardens are popular destinations. However, international tourism is highly restricted due to Abkhazia's disputed status. Most travelers can only enter through Russia, and entering Abkhazia via Georgia is considered illegal under Georgian law. This unusual travel situation puts tourists in a legal gray area. Visiting Abkhazia can result in penalties or travel bans if those individuals later try to enter Georgia. The situation also means Abkhazia's tourism sector remains dependent on Russian visitors and investments, limiting its economic potential on the global stage. Abkhazia has its own passport, but it's nearly useless internationally. Abkhazia issues its own passports to citizens, symbolizing its claim to independence. However, because the region is not widely recognized by the international community, the Abkhaz passport is virtually useless for international travel. Very few countries accept it. Even Russia, Abkhazia's closest ally, generally does not recognize it for official border crossing. Instead, most Abkhaz residents hold Russian passports, which grant them access to international travel, Russian social benefits, and even voting rights in Russian elections. This duality reflects Abkhazia's fragile sovereignty. It wants independence but is highly dependent on Russia for legitimacy, mobility, and survival. The Abkhaz passport is more of a symbol of identity than a functional document, one that represents pride internally but powerlessness globally. The capital, Sukhumi, was once a Soviet Riviera hotspot. Before the war and political turmoil, Sukhumi, the capital of Abkhazia, was one of the most beloved holiday destinations in the Soviet Union. Located on the Black Sea coast, Sukhumi was famous for its warm climate, palm-lined boulevards, botanical gardens, and elegant Soviet-era resorts. It was a favorite retreat for Soviet elites, including top-ranking Communist Party officials and intellectuals. The city had a vibrant multicultural population and was seen as a symbol of Soviet prosperity. However, after the Abkhaz-Georgian War, much of Sukhumi was destroyed, and many of its grand buildings now stand in ruins or are partially restored. Today, Sukhumi is slowly rebuilding, but the scars of the conflict remain visible, making it a city where beauty, history, and tragedy exist side by side. Abkhazia is heavily dependent on Russia for survival. Despite declaring independence, Abkhazia functions more like a protectorate of Russia. After recognizing Abkhazia in 2008, Russia became its main lifeline, providing financial aid, military protection, and political support. The Russian ruble is Abkhazia's official currency. Russian companies operate much of its infrastructure, and thousands of Russian troops are stationed in the region. In return, Abkhazia allows Russia significant influence over its domestic and foreign policy. Nearly 70% of Abkhazia's budget comes from Russian funding. This dependency has raised concerns, even among some Abkhaz leaders, about losing true independence, creating a delicate balance between sovereignty and survival. While many citizens welcome the security and stability that Russia offers, others quietly worry that Abkhazia has traded one form of control for another. Only a handful of countries recognize Abkhazia as independent. Although Abkhazia declared independence from Georgia in 1999, most of the world does not recognize it as a sovereign nation. The United Nations and the majority of countries, including the United States, the UK, and the European Union, consider Abkhazia to be a part of Georgia. As of now, only a small group of countries, including Russia, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Nauru, and Syria, officially recognize Abkhazia's independence. This limited recognition has massive consequences. Abkhazia is excluded from global organizations like the UN, the World Bank, and the Olympics. It also cannot form normal diplomatic relations, access international loans, or sign global treaties. As a result, Abkhazia exists in a kind of geopolitical limbo, functioning like a state, but invisible to most of the world. The Abkhaz-Georgian War left deep demographic scars. The war between Abkhazia and Georgia, 1992 to 1993, not only devastated infrastructure but also reshaped the region's population. Before the war, ethnic Georgians made up nearly half of Abkhazia's population. But during and after the conflict, around 200,000 Georgians were displaced, many fleeing to other parts of Georgia, especially the Samogil region. Accusations of ethnic cleansing were made, and to this day, many displaced Georgians have not been allowed to return home. As a result, Abkhazia became far more ethnically homogeneous, with ethnic Abkhaz, Armenians, and Russians forming the majority. This demographic transformation still fuels tensions, resentment, and international disputes, and the right of return remains one of the most controversial and emotional issues in negotiations between Georgia and Abkhazia. Abkhazia has its own language, but it's endangered. Abkhaz is the official language of Abkhazia, alongside Russian, and it's a unique member of the Northwest Caucasian language family. Spoken by the ethnic Abkhaz people, it features a highly complex system of consonants and relatively few vowels, making it one of the most phonetically unusual languages in the world. But despite its official status, Abkhaz is endangered. Many young people prefer to speak Russian in daily life, especially in urban areas like Sukhumi. Schools often teach in Russian, and media is heavily dominated by Russian content. As a result, fluent Abkhaz speakers are declining, and linguists warn that the language could disappear within a few generations if efforts aren't made to preserve and promote it. For the Abkhaz people, the language isn't just a way of communication, it's a symbol of identity and cultural survival. Abkhazia's flag is full of symbolism and history. The flag of Abkhazia isn't just a design, it tells the story of its people, their identity, and their struggle. The red canton with a white hand comes from the medieval flag of the Kingdom of Abkhazia, symbolizing peace, hospitality, and protection. The 7 white stars above the hand represent the 7 historical regions of Abkhazia, a sacred number in Abkhaz culture. The green and white stripes symbolize the peaceful coexistence between Islam and Christianity, reflecting Abkhazia's religious diversity. Every element of the flag was chosen intentionally to reflect both history and hope. For many Abkhazians, this flag is a symbol of resilience, raised not just as a national emblem, but as a reminder of what was fought for during the war and what is still being defended today. Abkhazia's capital, was once a Soviet Riviera. Before the war and political conflict, Sukhumi, the capital of Abkhazia, was known as one of the Soviet Union's top resort destinations. Located along the Black Sea, it was famous for its subtropical climate, lush palm trees, and grand seaside promenades. Soviet elites, scientists, and writers vacationed there, and the city even had botanical gardens, sanatoriums, and a thriving tourist economy. But after the war in the early 1990s, many of its iconic buildings were damaged or abandoned, and tourism collapsed. Today, Sukhumi still carries the charm of a forgotten paradise. Some parts are being slowly rebuilt, but others remain frozen in time, with crumbling Soviet-era hotels standing beside newly restored cafes and markets. It's a city where beauty and decay live side by side, a powerful visual symbol of Abkhazia's complex story. The Abkhazian Railway was once a vital link, now it's a ghost line. During the Soviet era, Abkhazia's railway system was part of a major transportation corridor, connecting Russia to Georgia through the scenic Black Sea coast. Trains passed through cities like Sukhumi, making Abkhazia an important stop for both passengers and freight. But after the war with Georgia in the 1990s, large parts of the railway were damaged, abandoned, or fell into disrepair. Today, the railway line from Russia to Sukhumi has been partially restored, with limited service operating under Russian control. However, the railway no longer connects to Georgia, symbolizing the severed ties between the two. Overgrown tracks, rusted stations, and empty platforms now serve as haunting reminders of a time when Abkhazia was connected to the wider world. Now, the trains come from one direction only.